This video will be a reflections video upon a recent play experience, just a few hours ago, with The Veil, a cyberpunk game based in the Powered by the Apocalypse style of play. The game is produced by Samjoko Publishing, and you can get it at the usual places in PDF, and you can get it in print at Indie Press Revolution. Okay, we have played through now 4 full group sessions, and we've had 2 solo sessions. We're now on our second MC in our cycle. 3 episodes or 3 sessions per MC. Okay, which means we've now had in play 2 different MC styles of bringing this game to the table. And so that gives us some interesting stuff to talk about upon reflection. One of the things that we decided as a group to do after the second solo session, so the second MC ran his first session of The Veil as a solo session with one of the characters, the previous MC. This gave them both a chance to, get that character into play and see what he's like. After that session, our internal feedback about it was that one thing that we wanted to do for the rest of this experiment was to not, walk carefully around the moves. That because we are approaching it as a learning to run Powered by the Apocalypse influenced games, as they are actually written, right, distinct from each other and distinct from other games, that it was working at cross purposes to try to move toward that kind of easy familiarity with the terms, with the moves, that allows you to bury game speak to a significant degree within dialogue and, let's say, more natural in-character discussion of things related to mechanics. So we decided to dispense with that. That the moves would be stated openly, the goals for the move would be stated openly, and that we would use this to come to a greater understanding of the moves and how the moves can be used, how they can vary, what the spectrum of responses that those moves can engender can be. And then, if we continue to play this game or similar games, then we can worry about the smoothness of play. So once we made that decision that smoothness of play was not going to be one of our explicit learning goals, it got a little bit easier to play, obviously. So there's that. The second big change that I think will be obvious is that the intention of how moves would be presented has shifted with the MC. So there was an immediacy of response. Make a move, get a response, all the way through the first 3 sessions and the original solo session, so the first 4 sessions. And that was very interesting. It gave the game kind of a breathless feel. The new way, with the second MC, is to process the move and then begin to resolve it in a, I hesitate to use the word natural because that's not really what I want to say, but to allow it to unfold over a greater period of time and not necessarily continuous or even contiguous. So the move is made, the move is successful, you know that the move's results are going to come, but it might not happen just right now. You might have to go through several layers of intermediaries, getting pieces or breadcrumbs in order to get that full response. So it's not happening up here on the meta level, player speaking to game master, getting information and then continuing on. And it's not happening immediately on the in-character level. You've made this move, here's your payoff, here's your reward, here's your result. It's interconnecting throughout the whole session. So that's interesting. The big challenge for this session, at least from my perspective as a player, was that what's going to happen, not so much with the cliffhanger, I wasn't worried about that. What's going to happen as the focus shifts from the original pairing of characters, our original main characters, to this new pairing of characters, right? As the MC is being rotated, we know that the MC's character is going to be moved off stage. It's just, I mean, we're aware that this is what's going to happen. So what is it going to be like when these two new characters are suddenly thrust together? So let's talk about the characters again. We have Tess, who is an artificial life form. We have Cadmus, who has been afflicted with some sort of futuristic disease, which is paying off in these interesting, definitely unnatural benefits, but is very definitely killing him. He might only have days to live if something doesn't kill him first. And we have Yorn, a street preacher from a small cult or small religion that is trying to, intimate or suggest that we're all one, right? We all have a shared experience in it, and we need to come together. So these three characters, the linchpin of these three characters has been Tess, the artificial human, right? She is friend to both. They are acquaintances of each other. Removing her might cause these two characters to spin off into their own orbits. Well, how we actually came to come together, that's interesting, was really disagreement. These two characters, because of their mutual connection, took the pains to talk to each other, and in talking to each other, they learned about important things, and their concern over Tess helps provide some of the gravity that keeps them together. But as they try and figure out what it is that they're going to do together about this shared problem, they discover that their shared problem is much bigger and much more important. So this was kind of a nice way to bring things together, that in a sense, almost like, an 80s buddies movie where these two very different characters are thrown together by circumstance and then are forced into seeing each other's shared humanity, in a sense. So whereas this process happened between Tess and Cadmus in a much more friendly, almost familial way, this one is brought about purely by circumstance and each character's own tenacity. They're not willing to let these small details go, right? We've got a street preacher who definitely wants to convert and show people the light, help them be enlightened, and we have this person who's dying, whose whole existence is being distilled down to this last desperate act of making sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else. So these two guys aren't going to say, yeah, well, okay, fine, go your own way. So the session went smoothly. It lasted for around 2 hours, and then we talked a lot about our impressions of the session. That's all recorded on Ivan Mike 1968, the YouTube channel, so you can go and see it there. And each of us is going to make our own reflections upon the session anyway. So I think it was a very important experience for Same Old G, for Jean-Francois Saint-Onge, to get to really play, to dig in and play with another player in the scene. The solo session was kind of like a warm-up, and then he gets to butt heads or grind gears with my character, who's been the consistent through line. But my character's timeline is coming to an end, right? So this torch of whatever it is that we're doing with the Veil, right, sparked by Tess, right, ignited by Cadmus, carried by Cadmus, will then have to be passed back to Tess and Yorn through to the end. Or maybe things will become completely different. It's hard to say at this point. We have a lot of sessions left. We have 2 more sessions left with Ivan, and then my 3 sessions. Now, one thing that we did agree at the beginning of the campaign is that at the end of Ivan's session, that's pretty much the end of Cadmus's life, somewhere in there, that I won't be playing him. And my 3 sessions will be in a post-Cadmus world. So, our reflections. Well, my reflections are that the Veil is a very distinct game that, at least with the playbooks that we are playing and the way that they interact with each other and the way that we have answered the questions, the setup questions that the game itself poses to you, it's put us on a very distinct path to talk about some very specific things. The nature of life and death, the nature of identity, what it is to be someone, and possibly the nature of life, the difference between organic life and inorganic life, meat versus machine. All of these things are constantly coming up, partly because of our own interests, partly because of character generation in the Veil, partly because of the moves from the playbooks, partly because it's now, actually 6 sessions in, right? All of these things working together, colluding to produce this particular dystopian cyberpunk world. So in the background, we're really, really now delving down to see the difference between the sheep-like regular people and those who see a little deeper, to see the heavy hand of the corporations, the conglomerates, and the things that they're trying to do, not really understanding the shape of them, but now at least being aware of these huge titanic forces moving in society, and the stratum of pawns, and then the sheep on top of all of that, and starting to question everything, while in the background the clock ticks, and soon that hammer is going to drop. Something is about to happen. We felt the tension from the very beginning. In the very first solo session featuring Tess, we see this tinderbox world about to be ignited. Tess's individual problems taking place in this world that's about to tear itself apart and explode. Cadmus's individual problems in this world that's about to tear itself apart. And Yorn's effort to hold everything together in a world that's trying to tear itself apart. So it's only going to take, right, what kind of pressure in which place before everything really, really starts to go wrong for this society. So it's a pretty potent place in which to play. I began this reflection saying that play was much easier today because we had jettisoned a goal, and we had stepped away from a certain type of attempt to speak, and I think that was a good decision at this point. I'm curious what game and what group and what length of play would make that particular goal a more narrative, less obvious invocation of the moves. I wonder what kind of situation would bring that about. But at this point, that's just, an interesting question to have. I'm liking being put in situations where deeper questions, rather than what are you going to do, but why are you doing it, become the focus of play. And one of the things that really helps bring this out is justifying the emotional state that you're in. And there's 2 things that are going on with the states, at least. One is you have to decide and justify what that state is, right? So you're rolling your 2d6, and then you're adding your emotional state modifier to it. So what are you really feeling? That's what really matters. And describing that, entering that into the shared collaborative space of the players so that people understand the inner life of the character and how that's causing the outward actions of the character. So that's interesting. But the other thing is that too long in any particular state causes mechanical interactions, right, that require certain mechanical adjustments, right? So you can become stuck in a manic state, for example, focused like tunnel vision, nailed to this particular emotional meter if you keep pushing that too far, and requiring physically, emotionally, completely to break away from it, to step away from it, or to receive an intervention from friends to help you alleviate all of that tension and free up, you know, unfog your mind, get rid of the fog of war. And I like all of these touches on the emotional aspect of the game, the part of the game that is really distinct. The other players and the MC in their reflections, I imagine they're going to talk more about the nature of moves and how the moves have actually been structured or constructed and what that means for play. But as I've only been in the player seat for this campaign, and as I've played a lot with this particular MC, I don't have much to say on that regard, and I'll leave that in their courts. So at 15 minutes, this is my post-play reflections on session 4, or full session 4, actual session 6, of our exploration of the Veil in our campaign, Cold is the New Warmth.